Well, hello everyone. I'm glad you could join us tonight. We've got an exciting program tonight, I believe. We have Dr. Michael Hamblin. Now, Dr. Michael Hamblin is what I would call the world guru of PBM. He's extremely knowledgeable, and I'll speak more about that in a minute. But first, I'll just mention for all those that join us. We have a Palm Ultimate that will be raffled off at the end of the month. So every time you join us, you have the chance of getting your ballot entered. So if you join us 4 times during the week, you can get 4 times during the month, you'll get 4 ballots in. And then we'll do the selection. So on to our guest here. So with Dr. Michael Hamblin, he's been around for quite a long time in the PBM realm. And in particular, I got a chance in, this would be probably, I'm going to say about 6, 7 years ago, got a chance to go down to see him at his facility when he was at Harvard University. And the one thing was when I talked to him, I was trying to tell him that the light power that I had on 2 of my devices, one of them was in over 1,000 optical watts of power. And the other one was a near infrared device that was also at about 30 optical watts of power. But at that point in time, it was pretty substantial. And he says, well, Tom, I just got to say, I don't believe you. He says, we just don't have that kind of optical power available with LEDs. So I said, well, how about, would you like a visit? So I went to see him. It was quite a long drive. I went with my son. It was a lot of fun. And we went to see him. And the very first thing, it was funny, he took I had a special, this was one of my earlier designs, was a halogen light source that could produce wavelengths basically between 600 and 1300 nanometer with a considerable optical power of like 25 optical watts. And the very first thing he did is put it up to his head like this. And I think I even got a picture of that one, but he said, first, he's kind of looking at it, I don't know, but it was a water-cooled halogen 300-watt bulb. Anyways, he did not burn his forehead. But when he put his light up to his forehead, he says, oh my, this is a lot of power. And then I brought out my LED unit, and he said, nah, that's still too hard to believe that you'd have that kind of light power. And then he asked his assistant to bring one of the power meters around. Well, when he did, and the assistant measured the light level, they said, this meter can't work because it's saturating the meter. That means you're right at the end of the meter's range. You can't measure any higher than that. So they had to go in the other room and pick up another light meter that had measured much higher levels of power. And he was quite surprised. So anyways, that was the foundation of our meeting the first time, and the power level that we had, and we've kind of kept in contact, and it was great to be able to meet him in England. And I listened into one of his lectures, and it was pretty good. We recorded it, and we've posted it on our PBM research, on our research tab, and he's excellent. It's a little difficult to hear. We didn't have the perfect recording equipment, but tonight I think you'll like this one because it's really a good recording that was done in England by Alex Fergus. Now, Alex Fergus, if you don't know him, he's a podcaster that has quite a large following, and he's been looking into red light therapy and other areas of health for the last, I think it's 8 years. One of his videos that he has almost 3 million views from about 8 years ago. So has a significant following, and people have passed him around, or sent out links to other people. So that's he's a great guy. So at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to start the video, and I'm going to be off to the side, and I'm going to have a couple comments as to we're going to keep my video going. But first, but first we're going to have our short little intro video, and then right after that video, we'll go right into the program.
15 years back, I realized that light could make a huge difference on the body. I ended up designing this very powerful light using LED technology. With this amount of very high power density, it can reach through the tissues and travel right to the joints. But the key is that the power density and the area is extremely important to deliver that light into that. The mitochondria receives that light and converts that energy into the cell. So it's like giving the cell super high octane fuel, and they run like a jet, and they're able to do all the things for repair in that. What are the products we have? Well, we have a small device, which is actually large when it comes to light therapy. You have a fairly large area of light and a high power density that can be used for different parts of the body, like your finger, shoulder, back, neck, knees, ankle, anywhere on the body. And then we have what's called the mini canopy, which is about a foot square in size. And then we have our full-size canopy, which is basically 6 of the mini canopies. And then we have another device, which is the helmet, and that device can help for mental issues, for brain injuries, for concussions, for PTSD, TBI, all of those kinds of things. And there's new research out there that shows it could be helpful for not only strokes, but dementia, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's, and just different brain issues. Our plans are to move this technology into every area of the world where there's pain and inflammation, which is basically everywhere, and to expand that so people understand all the applications where this technology can be used to help them in their health in the body as a wellness device. People are looking for how they can treat themselves without drugs.
All right, so now we're going to get into the video, and let's let it roll.
Lasers versus LEDs. Is one superior to the other? Does it matter, or does it depend on what you're trying to treat?
It became clear that you could do the same thing with LEDs as you could do with lasers.
Why do we need to pay for these devices? Why not just go outside?
Because you need to be up in the market. And a lot of people want to have a recommended dose that applies to everything. That may not be possible. By and large, you can't do any damage with LEDs, regardless of how intense they are. By and
Today, I interview Professor Michael Hamblin. Now, Michael Hamblin has been in the red light therapy space for a long time. He knows a lot. He's published maybe more than dozens, maybe hundreds now. He's involved in a lot of companies, creating products, and he's done multiple presentations, experiments, all that cool stuff. He's like the go-to guy. So it was an honor to sit down and have a conversation with him and ask him some questions on what was a very busy few days. This was on this Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening, just before the big gala dinner. So I was conscious of time, but at the same time, I did want to tap into him. So what did we talk about? Let me give you a quick run through before we kick it off. I start off with how red light therapy works, and he provides quite an interesting answer. We talk about contact versus non-contact treatment. We talk about the dosing sweet spot, biphasic dose response. I also ask him what happens if you overdo it. We look at full body versus targeted. We look at wavelength differences, hyper responders, thermal build up. It's a really, really good conversation. So I think you're going to enjoy it. So let's just get straight into it. Professor, it is an honor to sit here and share some time with you. I mean, I've been following your stuff for a long, long time, and I've learned a lot as well. So I am super excited. First up, let's just start with the basics. What is photobiomodulation? And do we know how it works yet? Have we figured that out?
Photobiomodulation is a fairly recent term, actually, because a lot of folks here at the meeting have been discussing why the term was coined, and I'll tell you a little about that later. But in reality, the scientific and medical approach known as photobiomodulation is as old as civilization, quite honestly, because way back when humans shed their body hair, they started to absorb sunlight. That was a big deal, because when we have a hairy like apes, we didn't absorb.
Well, here's a little bit. We all get a chance to. You could pause that for a moment. We all get a chance to talk about evolution here, but I would have to say that on this part, I don't believe in evolution. I really believe in creation, where we've been created. And hey, everybody has a chance to believe something different. That's fine. Good to be able to discuss these things. But with all the stuff that we've done, it always requires a high amount of design to make anything happen, anything come together. And when we talk of the millions of chemical systems that are all going on perfectly together on the body, and then you add to this whole area of, well, not only the electrical component that goes through your body, but you have to have the software in your brain at the same time working for this. So there's so many different things. It's very, very hard to imagine for me that all came out of nothing. Even if you gave a billion years to make nothing, it still will be nothing. So that's my view. But anyways, we'll let the professor have this view. Continue on here.
Light, when it stimulated their brains to grow. So the primitive Neanderthal apes, sort of semi-apes, right, had very small brains because they didn't get any light. So we're talking millions of years ago? I don't know, I'm not anthropologist, a long time ago. So, and then in early civilizations in China and India, Mexico, and what have you, people started going out in the sun to treat various diseases. At least they had sun there. It wasn't so much in Europe because we don't have a whole lot. So
I've noticed.
it wasn't that popular, but there was a whole thing for heliotherapy, which is going out in the sun up in the mountains. So they built clinics up in the mountains to absorb the
That's right, yes.
But Niels Svensson won the Nobel Prize in 1904, and he had an arc lamp. And from this arc lamp, he could produce two kinds of light. One was vaguely bluish, and one was vaguely reddish. And he selected which kind of light depending on what diseases he was treating. And, they would prescribe blue light for this set of people and red light for that. A little while earlier, Edison had invented the light bulb, and he built not him, but people built light cabinets with these light bulbs, just electric light bulbs, incandescent made ones, and the same ones that used to be used. And they were used for treating all sorts of diseases. So this carried on all the way up to early 1960s. It was fairly successful. You could go to heliotherapy clinics, you could have electric light baths, you could be treated with arc lamps, but never really dominated the medical profession, I have to say, but it did happen. When Wellman invented the laser, and we've heard in this meeting that Andre Mester experimented with an early laser and found he could heal mouse wounds in rats and mice and stimulate hair regrowth. And that was a big deal. And he called it laser biostimulation. And for several years, people thought there was something special about laser light. It was like a magic because it was coherent and monochromatic and what have you. But when LEDs were discovered about 20 years after that, it became clear that you could do the same thing with LEDs as you could do with lasers, provided the wavelengths were broadly in the same region. The intensities were broadly the same. So there was nothing magic about lasers. So what was called low-level laser therapy, they changed the name to photobiomodulation because, one, nobody had a clue what low level meant. Very subjective term, what is low and what is high. And you don't need a laser, so they had to get rid of the laser because LEDs work just fine. And then you're not always stimulating things. So they called it biostimulation, but then they said, well, if you've got pain, you don't want to stimulate your pain, do you? So that's when the modulation came in. So photobiomodulation. And this only happened about 10 years ago.
Well,
Praveen was saying when it happened. It does seem to have caught on.
yes.
And the range of diseases and conditions that can be treated is growing almost exponentially. Yeah, so I have a picture of a human body from the top of the head to the tip of the toes with dozens of different conditions to be treated.
Do we know how it's working? Do you know that?
Yeah, I mean, we're learning all the time how it works. We don't know everything yet, but it's the first law of photobiology that a photon of light has to be absorbed by a molecular chromophore to have any effect. And what investigators in laboratories do is they run absorption spectroscopy of chromophores, of tissue, molecules in tissues, and they match the peaks to the wavelength of the light. And you figure out what really absorbs in the human body. Well, the things that are colored. What's colored? Blood, for instance, bright red. Huge absorption spectrum. And you should be able to tell what color what region the absorption spectrum is, which is the inverse of the color, right? If it's red, it absorbs blue. You don't use blue light to excite hemoglobin, because blue light doesn't get to tissue, and the chromophore has to do something, right? It's not clear what hemoglobin would do, and it's not really involved in signaling, right? It transports oxygen inside erythrocytes. It's not like it does any signaling. But some molecules do signaling. And the major candidate for this is cytochrome C oxidase, which is unit 4 in the mitochondrial respiratory chain. And a lot's known about the spectroscopy of CCO. It has many, many absorption peaks. It's a very complex molecule with 13 subunits and 4 metal centers. People have spent their whole lives working on CCO. So it's pretty clear that CCO in the mitochondria absorbs a lot of the light. And it's a highly colored molecule. It's the reason why some of your internal organs are dark, like your heart, your liver, and your kidneys are dark brown, right? That's not because they've got a lot of blood in them, because they've got a lot of CCO in them, because they've got a lot of mitochondria in them. So that's the reason they're dark colored. Your brain is also gray, gray matter. That's also due to CCO. It's not brown because you've also got a lot of myelin.
Right.
Myelin changes the color from brown to gray, but it's still, your brain is colored. So things that have a lot of mitochondria have CCO, and that absorbs a lot of light. That's one real reason why mitochondria are doing the business. And in addition to the mitochondria working better, they consume more oxygen, use more ATP, the mitochondrial memory potential goes up. A lot of signaling happens. The mitochondria are heavily involved in signaling, and they do this by various mediators. So reactive oxygen species is one of them. A brief burst of ROS, and people think ROS is bad, but a little brief burst of it is good. Signals for a lot of beneficial processes, including activation of transcription factors, where changes in nitric oxide, and nitric oxide is a highly signaling molecule. When some people claim the nitric oxide is dissociated from CCO in the mitochondria, that's never been proven. You get significant changes in calcium. Now, the changes in calcium are interesting because in addition to CCO as a molecular chromophore, there are also what are known as light and heat activated ion channels. Members of the TRP family, transient receptor potential, about 70 members to this ion channel family, and TRPV is the ones that are light and heat activated. Now, light and heat is different. The light is blue or green light, and there is protein chromophores called opsons that absorb blue and green light, and they are connected to the opening of the ion channel. In addition to that, the ion channels appear to have what is a nanostructured layer of water attached to them because of the difference between hydrophilic and hydrophobic.
Okay, just want to mention something here. He mentions about the hydrophilic response water. Actually, what he's talking about here is something called structured water, although there's not a ton of research on this, but I believe there's something there to what he's saying, where you can actually create structured water. It's kind of like a fourth phase of water, but it's extremely, it only appears on a thin wall, like a very nanoscale application. But what it does is it's part of this whole transfer, helps with the electron transfer. And the wavelength is at 1050 nanometer, or sorry, there's a couple wavelengths. 980 is one of the absorption points around 980, and then around anywhere in the range of the 1050 to 1064 YAG lasers. But that, in those wavelengths, in the near infrared band, in that 980 spot and around the 1050, 1064, can actually help to produce this structured water, which is highly important to the cell. It helps the cell regain some of this. So that's what he's talking about, and that's why we have the helmet. So we have the palm lights with 660 and 810, but this is a whole new area where, let's say the super palm, where the 1050 can not only reach a little deeper, but it can actually cause some of the structured water to take place. So when we're talking of the helmet, it's possible that with the 1050, it can be even more significant to work when we're talking with the brain. That's the helmet right here that I have. And so we have models that have the 660 and the 810, or 660 and the 1050. So yeah, we'll continue on from here.
Membrane, you get exclusion zone water, nanoscale. It sort of stuck to these ion channels. And water, this exclusion zone water is believed to selectively absorb infrared. So things like 980, 1064, longer infrared wavelengths are absorbed by this nanostructured water, which changes the conformation of the ion channel without any bulk heating. Right? I mean, bulk heating would probably do it, but you can get opening of the ion channels without bulk heating. So it's kind of this selective water absorption. So there's and opening these these are calcium ion channels. They're in the plasma membrane, but they're also in the mitochondrial membrane. So you get changes in calcium, along with changes in ATP and ROS. So whether you're targeting CCO or whether you're targeting TRPV channels, the net result is broadly so. I mean, I think there are some differences, but by and large, the result is similar. More ATP, burst of ROS, changes in calcium, and a lot of signaling happening downstream.
You mentioned earlier the sun clinics. Yeah. So for someone totally new to this, why do we need to pay for these devices? Why not just go outside?
Because you need to be up in the market. So if you go lie on the beach, I mean, it's nice, it probably does you some good. But heliotherapy is way more effective if you're up in the mountains. Now, the people at the time thought it might be something to do with the temperature or the fact there's more UV in the sun up there, but I personally think it's because the oxygen tension is lower the higher you go up, right? And the low oxygen tension...
Yeah, I just want to make a point here that I might be a little bit, have a little bit of disagreement, not maybe slight here, just that I think that there is considerable energy coming down if you're on a beach, on a summer beach, and well, as you get closer to the equator, you're more 90 degrees to the sun, unless depending on the time of the year that you're doing it. But you are getting about 100 milliwatts per square centimeter of total energy that's across the, as he talks about the UV and blue spectrum all the way to the red and the near infrared. Whereas we have all of our energy down into the 100 it's still 100 milliwatts, but it's all over into the red spectrum, red or near infrared. So he's right when it comes to amount of energy with panels, is that or other devices, you need to be have levels that are significant to make a difference. And the sun would be a lower amount than some of our devices, but the total power is the same. But the big thing here is not some of the energy is off in the far infrared, which just warms up your skin, and some of the energy in the blue UV spectrum that also heats up your skin. So really, it's only the red that coming from the sun, which is red and near infrared. And that band between 600 and about 1300 nanometer represents about 30% of the power that's coming from the sun. So it's still, the sun is still quite significant. And I thought it was pretty cool that when we were in London, funny part is we had this big PBM meeting, researchers from around the world, and nobody realized, we found out afterwards, in the evening just before we left, that there was a display of the one woman, I'm thinking Nightingale, who was using light therapy, and there was an exhibit of light therapy across the road, and here you got 300 people on the other side of the road know nothing about her work with light therapy and using the sun and using actually a concentrator that would have a big magnifying glass that basically would take some of the sun and bring it down a little more intense on the human body where she wanted to put it. So that was back 100 years ago or something like that. So pretty crazy, but that was Florence Nightingale. And we learned about it. We took some pictures there, but the exhibit was closed by the time we were finished. So anyways, continue on.
Changes the mitochondrial metabolism and makes them more susceptible to light.
Yeah, right. So you mentioned ROS. Now, a question I get asked all the time is around dosing, duration. Is more better? Do you go for the most powerful laser panel device, whatever we're using? At what point where is that tipping point? I know we have biphasic dose response curves. How?
It's an interesting question, right? So the biphasic dose response is very easy to demonstrate in cell culture. Everybody does that. It's fairly easy to demonstrate in laboratory animals. And the
Okay, I just want to say here too, he's bang on here. He's talking about when you're doing these, when they do the research studies that have said that you have this biphasic dose, which is you got a point coming up to a certain point where you get maximum energy, or I should say maximum effect from the energy that you're delivering. And then after that, there's usually a fairly sharp decline. And what he's talking about here is that most of the research has been around cell culture. Well, a cell in a plate does not have blood flow through it. So you don't have blood flow, you don't have a lymphatic system, you don't have 100 other or 1,000 other mechanisms going on at the same time. So the cell, they're trying to exclude everything else and just look at the cell, but there's so many other factors that are going on, including the fact that if you got a very thin layer and you start increasing the amount of light, that's going to be very easy to overheat, raise the temperature. We know that if you go up to 45 degrees C, you end up, the cell starts, doing damage to the cell. So interesting also, he talks about, I think he'll come up with this, is that actually you mentioned a little earlier, is that to actually increase the temperature a bit helps some of these things. So that's why sometimes it's very helpful to have some extra warmth, but you don't want to go over that. But this whole thing about biphasic dose is a lot based on cell culture and also on small animals. And like one example, there's one research study that says 4 joules per square centimeter. So that's that peak of this is where you get the best performance or best activity outcome at 4 joules per square centimeter. And then after that is it just decays. So somebody would like to apply that so that was a study on knees. Okay, that's great. When you come to a human knee, it's about, probably that big diameter or bigger. But they're talking about 4 joules per square centimeter on a rat's knee. Okay, so you cannot exactly translate what is coming from a rat's knee to a human knee, because you would need, by the time you're trying to get through all that tissue, you're going to need 10, maybe 100 times the amount of energy to end up at 4 joules per square centimeter at the target area, wherever that is in the knee joint. So you're going to have a lot of losses going through all that tissue. So you're going to have to start off with a lot more light on the surface. And I believe most of the time that we're very much on the low end, the starting edge, and on that upward line of the graph, where we're talking 1 joule, maybe 2 joules per square centimeter, even with a lot of energy on the surface. So you might have 40 joules, maybe 100 joules per square centimeter, maybe even 200 joules per square centimeter, which might mean you have to do a 20-30 minute treatment to get the same amount of energy down into the center. So it's really important. Now, the other thing he's going to talk about in a minute is just the fact that the amount of time that you take to deliver it does, they did 1 minute, 10 minutes, and 100 minutes, and I'll let him clarify. But if you tried to do all of that energy dose in 1 minute, might not be a good thing, probably would overburn the tissue. So let's go on from here then and continue.
good thing about working with laboratory animals is that they're genetically identical. So when you buy large sea mice, every single one is identical. People are not like that. There's huge variations in human beings due to, there's even obvious ones like skin color, body mass index, how much fat there is, age, but there are genetic and epigenetic differences. And all of these variability can affect how people respond to light. So it makes designing clinical trials difficult because we had a lot of discussion about this morning, and people are saying you should exclude non-responders when you're recruiting for clinical trials because there's no point having them there when you know it's not going to work. The question is, how do you tell non-responders ahead of time? So when people talk about the biphasic dose response, there are always a few people who are hypersensitive, right? Even a little bit of light is probably going to be too much. So if you say, these people are complaining about side effects from too much light, it's only a fairly small few, a few percent or like that. There's another chunk, probably a bigger chunk, who are non-responders. However much light you give, it's like shining light on a block of wood. So if you're gonna, and a lot of people want to have a recommended dose that applies to everything. That may not be possible. You may have to personalize the dose by some kind of testing that you do, whether it's a questionnaire or some kind of biomarker measurement or something. But broadly speaking, there's not been that many reports of biphasic dose response in humans where there's too much light. I mean, Paolo Cassano this morning reported one where he was doing, remember exactly what he was doing now. It would be something to do with psychiatry, but anyway, he had low, medium, and high doses of PBM. He was measuring molecular spectroscopy in the brain, so phosphate and phosphocreatine in the brain with MRS, magnetic resonance spectroscopy. And he found that the medium dose of light was clearly the best. The low didn't do anything and the high didn't do anything. So that was a clear demonstration of a biphasic dose response in humans. But not many people, but
Hey, if you are enjoying this video, can you just leave a comment saying you're liking it or hit the like button? I guess it's much easier just to hit the like button, isn't it? And if you want to see more interviews like this, be sure to hit subscribe as well, because I did do 8 interviews during PBM 2024. So there's a lot of content to roll out. If someone was experimenting, they get it.
So yeah, hit our subscribe button. We love it. And hit the like button. I failed to mention that. It's really important to us. And also, we do have another Alex interview from last week where Alex interviewed me, and there will be some other posts there as well. So do visit our website to, especially on the PBM, on the research tab, go all the way down to the bottom, PBM 2024. And you can see this discussion, as well as the other interview that was done by me, and plus some on me, I guess, and some others as well. So continue on.
Divisive panel, and they want to experiment, maybe recovery, sports performance recovery.
Right.
How would they know they've gone too far? What are there side effects? What would they see from a negative point of view?
Well, I mean, if you're doing exposure of large parts of the body, right, you've got a big panel or a light bed or something. If you had too much, it would probably find it difficult to get to sleep. Normally, photobiomodulation is really good for sending you to sleep. But if you get too much light, you kind of over-agitate and you stay awake. And, some people respond headache,
Yeah.
but they kind of go away. The things people report are fairly sort of mild and random. I mean, Paolo had a list of side effects. One was slight visual disturbance and flashes, but very transient. I think I've heard of people reporting a funny taste in their mouth.
Right.
But again, mild and transient.
So are you aware of any long-term issues that there's nothing in the literature around that. So if someone,
Extremely safe.
Then if someone was wanting to experiment, you're actually better off starting high and working your way down.
No, I think you're better off starting low.
Okay.
Feel better.
That's right.
And what normally happens is you start low and you feel it doing some good. So the next day you go a bit longer, you turn the power up. They keep doing that. And normally what you find is it's not getting any better, exposing longer or turning the power up. So that's probably when you stop. Because if you turn it up even more, you might start experiencing side effects, maybe. I mean, what people do report if they do too much light is the benefit goes away.
Finished. Yes.
So it's not that they feel actual side effects. It's that the benefit that they had and they thought was going to get more with more light, perfectly reasonable, turns out to go away.
Let's say someone has done that experiment and they've found that 5 minutes with this particular device seems to be we'll say 10 minutes with this particular device seems to be the sweet spot. They've done an experiment over a couple of weeks. The company, they're using a device from the company comes out with a new model that's twice as powerful. Everything else is the same. Could that individual simply upgrade to that panel and start using that device for 5 minutes, i.e. double the intensity, shorten the treatment time? Is it as simple as that?
We did an experiment. It was an animal model, but we compared illumination times with the same dose of light, the same total number of joules.
Yeah.
So we had 1 minute, 10 minutes, and 100 minutes. The 100 minutes and the 10 minutes both worked fine, but the 1 minute didn't. So I do think you need to give the tissue sufficient time to respond to the light. And you're going to ask, how long is that? 5 minutes is probably enough. The 10 minutes is good. 1 minute is probably not long.
What about if you're trying to treat deep into the femur, for instance?
So here's a very good point. And especially I see it applies when we're talking of, let's say, using the palm light. And they're trying to treat the hip with this light and reduce pain. That short 1 minute, even though we got a lot of power behind it, won't do much there. But if you had problems with your hands, amazingly, 1 minute or stuff when we're talking using the oral device that we have, which snaps into the front of this to treat inside the mouth, it's amazing that even 1 minute of light treatment, because we have enough energy on this thing, it does substantial good things. So the 1 minute could be, if you're very shallow, some very shallow things. As soon as you start getting a little thicker, a couple minutes. As soon as you're trying to treat or trying to help your ear, let's say tinnitus or something like that, 1 minute, 3 minutes. We do the brain, 1 minute, 3 minutes, gives you some kind of perspective. If you're trying to treat your hip, you might have to spend a half an hour around the whole area. And the reason being is 4 joules per second. If we went by that biphasic dosage, and the idea is that that's what you have to have on the surface of skin, is totally bogus. Because you could have 4 joules per square centimeter from our palm light in 30 seconds on the hip. But guess what? We have to see 20, 30 minutes with this to make up for all the losses of the light energy going from the surface of the skin down to the target. If the problem is just underneath the skin, then you can look at short dosage. But if you're trying to treat all the way deep into the hip, you're going to have to spend a lot longer. And in that case, you want to use a lot more of the near infrared as opposed to the red, even though I'd use both, because both are beneficial. Both red and near infrared is beneficial, whether it's 810 or 1050. The combination tying it to red is also good. So here we go, we'll go again.
And you want to bump the intensity up with power density to get sufficient energy deep into the tissue. But from a surface level point of view, you're potentially overloading the skin, for instance. Is that just a trade-off that has to be made, or is that potentially?
Here's one more thing: is that again I've heard this a number of times said, but I love how Michael Hamblin unfolds this. But you can have a lot of dosage to the top of the skin, and it won't make any difference. I mean, when we're talking of light energy coming from the sun, and the blue, green, and UV end is very, very high energy in the photons. So if we use that as a guide to say that you only want 4 joules on the surface of the skin because you don't want to over-treat, and this is what's been said, is that everybody who goes out on the beach would be all invalids after they come off the beach because they've been overdosed. In the course of an hour, you can imagine that's a huge amount of time when it comes to light treatment. And even though we're talking 100 milliwatts per square centimeter from the sun, so we're considering 100 milliwatts per square centimeter on this. So no, the treatment on the surface of skin extra long time is really not going to do much. And you heard him say is basically the over treatment. Now he will get into the area of lasers where you have a much higher power density. In that case, you can actually cause burns. So continue on.
Damaging risky.
You can't generally do any damage inside with a focus light because it's going to get too hot on the skin. It's going to feel like going to say ouch, right? In fact, it's difficult to burn somebody.
Yes.
Because by the time you've held the beam there long enough to burn them, they're screaming in agony. I mean, come on. Nobody's going to sit there and let somebody with a laser burn a hole in them. I mean, it's just not going to happen.
Okay.
So by and large, you can't do any damage with LEDs, regardless of how intense they are. By and large, if you can get hot, you really pump enough energy to somebody you can get. But, the body is very good at coping with heat. You sweat, your blood vessels dilate to try and cool you.
The lasers versus LEDs, is one superior to the other? Does it matter, or does it depend on what you're trying to treat?
It also depends on how much money you've got and how convenient it is. So, lasers are expensive and they have lots of regulations, which is reasonable for high power lasers. You can burn people, and focused laser beams can blind you, and that has happened to lots of people, and usually in labs by accident.
Wow.
I mean, that's happened. So there is regulations for lasers. LEDs usually have a lot more power than lasers, and you may say, really? The type of class 4 lasers has 20, 30 watts usually. 20, 30 watts of LEDs is nothing, really. I mean, a panel has 100 or 200 watts, and light bed has 1,000 watts. So you couldn't get 1,000-watt laser.
No.
It couldn't be done.
So just as he's saying, our mini canopy is this one here. We've condensed a considerable amount of power into this space. So we have over 60 watts of optical power, or 60,000 milliwatts of optical power coming off of this device, where let's say the palm is let's say 5, 6, 7 watts of power over this area. Both of them represent about 100 to 180 milliwatts per square centimeter. But when he's talking about power, this is a very power dense unit, and definitely that helps with the treatment area, that we can help get additional treatment depth, and it's not a perfect relationship. You're not going doubling the power is not going to get you doubling the depth. That doesn't work that way. But also with the helmet, we're delivering with this helmet, and that's after we've cut it back. We used to even have it more powerful, but right now this helmet has 25 optical watts, and you feel it when you put when you put this on the red wavelength, and you have the near infrared wavelength, which you see right now. Considerable energy. So that's 25 watts, or delivering 25 joules for every second. So go ahead with the continue with the video.
Not that you want to, because you'd have to expand the beam to cover the whole body. It'd be ridiculous.
Something got a Star Wars. The contact versus non-contact. Let's say contact, you have LED emitting 100 milliwatts over a centimeter squared. Non-contact, you have a device, I don't know, 300, 400 milliwatts, but you work it out that it's 100. It's the equivalent of 100 at the treatment area. Is there a difference? Does it matter? Is one better than the other?
It depends how desperate you are to use all your photons of light. Yeah, I quite often tell people that with LEDs, light is cheap. You can afford to throw 90% of it away,
Yeah.
and enough will get into the body to do some good.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, if you've got an expensive laser that you've paid an arm and a leg for, you may want to ensure that every single photon is used, in which case, if you put the probe and press it hard into the skin, more photons will go in. I mean, it's quite clear. But, I mean, with LEDs, do you really care?
No, I personally don't, and that's why I smiled when you answered that, because yeah, that's been my thought process. And I mean, some people say, why would you buy a panel? Because it's not perfect size for the body. You're better off getting wraps or pads. And it's like, well, panels are very convenient. They're cost effective. They're simple to use.
You know, I think some of these flexible wraps are pretty good. I mean, look at it. It's like curling up under a nice warm blanket, right? You know, some PBM.
Totally. But then the trade-off with that is a lot of those mats are very weak. They're very underpowered. Well, some of the ones that I've tested, at least.
The one there, they said it was.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay, I've never. Maybe. Yeah. I mean, that one.
LEDs in it. I mean.
Yeah. I mean, the ones I've tested, the cheaper Chinese ones, 10, 15, maybe 20 at best. But yeah, I guess it comes down to convenience. It's just refreshing hearing that answer, because some people are quite. We won't get into that. I want to ask about wavelengths. 660, 850, two common wavelengths.
That's quite a good pairing. Yeah. There's some evidence that putting them together gives you added benefits.
Really? Well,
yeah. So comment there was that came underneath was or using them separately, and what we decided in our unit was more research has to be done, but basically we're providing the 660 nanometer, which works on certain things, and as you're doing the treatment, you use either the 810 or the 1050 for the other near infrared wavelength. You don't have to have them together at the same time. Plus, we don't do that. and there's a big reason why we don't mix the wavelengths together, is we end up in, if I'm looking at the, let's see, any of our devices, but let me just pull up the Ultimate. We have all of the LEDs or there for when you flip it one way, the switch for the 660 nanometer. So we get maximum power at that wavelength. So you decide as the user, depending on what you're trying to treat, maximum power with what you're trying to treat results in a certain time for that wavelength. And then you can switch it to the other wavelength and do the amount of time that you want for that. So as let's say that hand, coming back to the hand, I'll do 1 minute of the red, 1 minute of the near infrared, to treat some parts on the hand or even on skin and that kind of thing. When it comes to hip, you now have the choice of spending a lot more time with the near infrared, maximum power of near infrared, and using just a quarter of the time maybe with the bright red, because there's still very good beneficial effects from the fact that the red is being highly absorbed by the blood and will do wonderful things. And then when we're talking of the 810, so with the 660, when it comes to the helmet here, you're actually getting through the bone, through the skull, and into the brain. So you're actually stimulating or you're modulating stuff that's going on just below the skull and affecting the blood inside the skull, so by the brain. So that's very useful. But the other wavelength, which we spend more time on, whether it's the helmet here or the palm device, if a person was using 1 minute of the bright red and then 3 minutes of the near infrared, you have that choice of having 100% of the power on one wavelength or 100% of the power on the other wavelength.
What would those added benefits be? I'm not aware of that.
Me neither. That's what people say.
Okay.
Honesty, I love it.
Are there other wavelengths out there? I mean, is a device with 660 and 850 all we need? Or if there's a device...
Not necessarily. I mean, 1064.
Okay, so he's just talking about 1064. That's close enough to the 1050 nanometer wavelength. Like, that's very, very close when it comes to wavelengths to the helmet or helmet or the Super Palm, which we also have with the 1050 nanometer. So whether it's 980, 1050, 980 happens to be an absorption point of the water. Then you get into 1050, 1064, still another area of the absorption of the water for that special reaction he was talking about.
Oh, 1070, this sort of area is becoming very popular.
Yeah.
And certainly for the brain, it may be the best for all we know. And it works for other parts of the body. It just hasn't been studied as much.
Much more studies needed.
It's a very interesting wavelength because it hits the water peak.
Yeah, right.
So there's several folks who've done laboratory experiments that suggest that 980 works at much lower total doses, total joules within total rate. And so it's easier to overdose with 980. Whether that means it performs better, but it's certainly an interesting wavelength.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting conversations out there around, some of these wavelengths, 808, 810. I know that's a
850. 904 superpulsed is quite interesting because it does seem to work better per photon than other waves. They say that's because these nanosecond pulses are such high peak powers that they penetrate further, which may be right. I don't know whether it is right. But certainly 904 superpulsed is worth considering.
Yeah, something I'll have to look into more. When I asked if we could speak, I said we'd only take 10, 15 minutes. I think we've gone over that. But before I wrap up, I have one question. What's your personal PBM protocol? Are there devices you use? Is there a routine you
No, I have a thing I put on my head, basically. I mean, near infrared 850 or helmet type thing. I mean, I have other devices that I will use if I have some kind of injury or a sore bit, like a muscle pain or a joint or something. Okay, not regularly, just whenever I feel something.
So you're not doing full body treatments. You don't have a big bed or anything like that. You're lying in. No, is that that sort of surprises me.
Does it? Oh,
He doesn't have many aches and pains.
The
I have a panel. I have a Jew panel. I'm not saying I don't use it regularly.
yeah, all right, interesting. Yeah. I'm sure you must have a fair few products.
Yeah.
Professor, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate the time and everything you've done over the years and continue to do. So thank you again.
All right. So I hope you really enjoyed that. And I know we're later in the questions here. So I tell you what, for all those that join us for this long, you got your ballot and you don't have to stay to the end. Anyways, I will answer a few questions if you have right now. So there's a question here. Is that, so James is asking, is that on the order of plasma water or totally different? You know what? This is one area I haven't dug in deep. I just know that it's possible. I heard that 1050, 980, 1064 all can work in the this special 1050 nanometer light. So it provides the right wavelength to actually create some of this structured water, as they call it. Okay, another question from Rochelle. Could this light therapy also be used to treat seasonal disorder? I think it's called SAD. You know what? I'm going to tell you something here that will save you a lot of money. No, you don't need my light for doing that. As a matter of fact, it gets as simple as this. If you go to Home Depot and buy a good quality bulb, that's not the dollar store bulbs, but the good quality bulb that is more like a 5,000 or 6,000 Kelvin, it's going to be very bluish, okay? And what you want to do is that is basically what will help you first thing in the morning. So the very first thing is to illuminate yourself with the light from an LED bulb that's a good quality, like a Philips or something like that. And what that'll do is it helps set the circadian rhythm. And so that's the easiest way to start. And the second one is, at the end of the day, if you're sensitive, if you got a circadian rhythm that's messed up, you want to light your, you can use my palm light with the red light if you've got one, and just use it to illuminate the room so you have no blue light, or you have very low levels of blue light, because blue light in the evening will also work against your circadian rhythm. So you have this white bluish light first thing in the morning, and in the evening more of a red. You can also get blocking glasses that will block the blue, so that and the worst thing is computer screens. You can also put the computer screens in that mode so that they don't give you a high amount of blue. You want to keep that blue blue down in the evening so that your body can adjust properly and set its clock properly. And so that even includes watching TV. It's not just computer screens, it's your cell phone, anything with that produces blue light is not a good thing for some people in the evening. Some doesn't matter. I mean, I can be looking at my computer screen, and when I hit the sack, I'm just out like a light, no problems. My issue is I can't drink coffee at night after 6 o'clock, or I might wake up about, 3 o'clock in the morning. the other issue I have is that don't tell me a new idea at about 8 o'clock in the evening, because I will go to sleep nicely, and by about 3 o'clock in the morning, I'll be trying to figure out how to solve the problem. So don't do that to me. Anyways, anyways, we hope. Oh, I want to mention to everybody that there's a new website out there called methylenblue.red. We'll post it in the chat here. That's methylene, METHYLENE, blue, BLUE, .red. There's some books on that website. There's a great video. Now it does talk about this tying tying the red light, which it can be the right, this 660 nanometer is the right wavelength to actually work in conjunction with the methylene blue. And the video is actually tying that to another step, which is a hyperbaric chamber, which is fantastic. So methylenblue.red, and I'll just tell you, it's such a new website that I know that's out there that you cannot search for it. So don't try and put it in your search bar and look for methylenblue.red. You won't find it at this point, maybe in 6 months from now. So you got to actually type that out, www.methylenblue.red or HTTPS, but anyways, methylenblue.red, and you'll find some very interesting things as to how it can help the human body. It's a great wellness, something that wellness product, I guess. So just want to let everybody know about it. Check it out. It's fantastic stuff. So we will be having our, coming up to the end of October here. Soon we'll be in the month of November, very beginning of November, we'll be declaring who the winner is for the month of October here. So, okay, Sharon's asking, not sure if you had saw my question, if this helps. Sorry, you moved it around on me. I'm not sure what that is. We'll have to get back to you on that. I'm not sure of what that term is. Okay. Thank you. I just got some help here. So it turns out that what you're asking about, vitiligo, is something that's an autoimmune disorder. Very, very interesting how PBM can help improve autoimmune disorders. So there's all sorts of autoimmune disorders, including all kinds of things with the skin to, you name it, across the body. So anyways, all the best, and please join us in a week's time, and we will announce what it is maybe a day or two before the actual event. But we want to thank you for joining us, and I wish you all of God's richest blessings. All the best for now. Bye.